October pasture beaten brass gold. Wade Holloway cut the engine on the John Deere his father bought in '72. 3 black Range Rovers stopped on the far side of the fence. A woman stepped out and looked straight at him. "Hey, Flannel, you the help out here?" Wade did not turn around. "Listen carefully. That rust bucket of yours is trespassing on my future parking lot. Ride it home to whatever trailer you crawled out of and tell your boss the grown-ups are here now." 5 seconds of silence. In Dallas, Garrett Pike signed the survey order on Comanche Springs. The next morning was bright and cold, the kind of Texas autumn that smells like dry mesquite and woodsum smoke. The Dusty Bell Diner sat on the corner of Main and Pecan in Cedar Hollow, its windows fogged from the griddle, and its booze half full of men in feed caps. A bell rang over the door. Adeline Voss walked in with the air of someone who had never in her life been told to wait for a table. She took the booth by the window, set down a PA per cup of Cabrevan coffee, and opened her laptop. The county appraiser was already late. She did not seem to care. Her phone rang, and she answered before the second ring. "Closing Vista Lara inside 90 days. "Yes, I have it on calendar." Her voice was Dallas warm and Dallas impatient at once, the kind of voice trained to take up the whole room. "Tell Boyd if he wants the easement language tightened, he can fly down himself." At the far end of the counter, a man in a flannel shirt was cutting pancakes for a small girl with a brown braid. He did not look up. He did not need to. He recognized the voice. The second call came in 3 minutes later. Garrett Pike. Wade could hear the chairman's voice faintly leaking from the receiver. Low and silken. "The neighboring parcel matters. Adeline, talk to the holdout. Charm him if you must. Offer 8 figures if it gets us moving. We need that water easement clean before the bond rating comes through." Adeline rolled her eyes at her own coffee. "Garrett, it's a hick with a tractor. He'll sign for $2 million in a handshake. I'll have it on your desk by Friday." Ivy looked up from her pancakes. "Daddy, why is that lady talk so loud?" Wade kept his eyes on the plate. He cut another piece of pancake into a smaller piece. "Some people use loud to cover small." "Sweetheart." Adeline ended the call. She stretched her shoulders, glanced around the diner, and her eyes caught his. A flicker, 1 second of recognition. Her mouth did not change shape, but the tips of her ears went the faintest shade of pink. She stood up. She walked over. She stopped beside his booth, as though she had simply decided to. Mr. Wade did not offer the name. He took a sip of coffee and looked at her over the rim of the cup. Adeline pivoted into her professional smile, the one she had paid a coach in Dallas $8,000 to perfect. "I'd like to discuss your property line at some point. Convenient for you?" WDE set the cup down. "Property line's been there since 1887. Ma'am hasn't moved. He placed a card on the table. Cream talk, dark blue ink, no graphic. She walked out without looking back. Ivy reached over, picked up the card, turned it upside down, and squinted at it as if she might learn something from the wrong side. WDE slid it into the pocket of his flannel without reading it. That night, he stood on the cedar porch of the white frame house, watching the surveyor's headlights sweep slow patterns through the pasture beyond the creek. A single light from the Vista Lara side, then 2, then 4. At 8 the next morning, Marisol Reyes picked up her office phone in her 2-room law office above the Cedar Hollow hardware store. Adeline was on the line and already mid-sentence. "I need a list of holdout landowners adjacent to Vista Larga. Anyone whose signature might be required for easement adjustment. I want it within the hour." Marisol reached for her notepad with one hand and her coffee with the other. She gave 3 names. She spoke slowly, each one. None of the M was Wade Holloway. "What about the parcel to the east of Vista Lara?" Adeline pressed. "The one with the old White House and the John Deere. I drove past it yesterday. Who owns that?" Marisol set the coffee down. "That parcel is privately held. Owner doesn't take meetings." She hung up before Adeline could push. Then she sat at her desk for a full minute, staring at the wall. After that, she opened the bottom drawer of her file cabinet. Inside, behind a row of plain manila, sat a leather binder, Hartley Cattle Company deed history, 1887 present. She put her hand flat on the cover. She did not open it. She drew her hand back 3 miles east behind the horse barn. Wade climbed the wooden stairs to a loft he had built himself the spring after Eleanor died. The walls were lined with what looked, at a glance, like a normal rancher's keepsakes. They were not a framed bachelor's degree in agricultural economics from Texas A&M Dean's List, a black and white photograph of his great-grandfather receiving a ed from a Texas land office clerk in 1887, and a current hydrology survey color-coded by aquifer zone with Comanche Springs marked at its center. The blue line of the flow ran east across Hartley Cattle Company land before it reached anywhere else. 14,000 acres of Vista Lara depended on water that could not be legally moved without his signature. Without WDE's name on a single page, not one drop crossed the fence. He picked up the phone and called Marquetti and Boyd. Austin Theo, pull the easement files. Every page Voss Meridian has filed on the Vista Lar deal in the last 6 months. Today that afternoon, Adalyn came up the long gravel drive of Hartley in her Range Rover. She brought a bottle of Napa Cabernet that had cost her $400 in a Dallas wine shop, and she carried it with both hands. WDE met her on the porch. He took the bottle, set it on the kitchen counter, then poured her a glass of well water from the pitcher in the icebox. Water here's older than the wine. Ma'am, try it first. Tea she drank. Her face shifted clean, faintly mineral sweet on the back of the tongue. Where does this come from? Comanche Springs, 3 miles that way. Been running since before the state of Texas existed. A door creaked. Ivy came in leading Biscuit, the old Palomino Meyer, by the halter. She stopped when she saw the woman in the kitchen. Adalyn, who had never knelt to a child in her life, set the glass down and lowered herself onto one knee. Hi, I'm Adalyn. Who's your friend? This is Biscuit. She's old. So am I. Sometimes. WDE watched. He did not speak. When Adalyn left, she paused at the open door of the Range Rover. Mr. Holloway, what would it take for you to sign an easement to know what you do with the water? He went back inside. The door closed. That night, the file from Austin arrived by courier in a sealed accordion folder. WDE carried it up to the loft and turned the pages slowly, one at a time, until he reached the one Theo had marked with a yellow tab. A scanned internal memo, dated September 14th. The signature at the bottom was Garrett Pike's. The subject was the engineered diversion of Comanche Springs flow toward an Austin Metropolitan Water contract, a contract that by the third page was worth $400 million over 15 years, and would draw the spring dry inside 7. Wade folded the memo. He looked at the clock on the wall. He spoke softly to no one. Eleanor would have burned this place down before letting him have it. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the surveyors crossed the fence. Wade was already up. He had been up since 4:30, the way he had been since Eleanor died, sitting on the porch with a cup of black coffee, while the sky behind the live oaks went from charcoal to peach. He saw the first white flag go in on his side of the property line. Then the second. He set the coffee down. He walked out calm and unhurried, his boots stirring up small puffs of kish dust. He stopped 20 feet from the survey foreman. Gentlemen, you're on Hartley land. I'll need you to pack up and step back across that fence. The foreman called Adalyn. She arrived in 20 minutes flat, blazer over a silk shell, new cowboy boots that had not yet learned the shape of her foot. Mr. Holloway, my crew has authorization from Vista Larga's cellar. If your fence line is in dispute, I suggest you take it up with the county. Wade said nothing for a beat. Then he took out his phone and dialed. Sheriff Bender, Wade Holloway. I've got 6 men on my property, and I'd appreciate a deputy when you've got the time. Sheriff Tom Bender pulled up in 12 minutes in a county cruiser the color of dried mud. He stepped out, settled his hat and walked straight past Adalyn to where Wade was standing. Morning, Mr. Holloway, sir. What have we got? Adalyn noted the sir. She filed it. The sheriff turned to the surveyors. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Within 10 minutes the crew had pulled their flags, loaded their equipment into 2 pickup trucks, and rolled back across the fence onto V. Sta La Ronde. Adalyn stood in the middle of the dirt in a blazer that suddenly felt like the wrong piece of armor for the country she was standing on. After they left, she did not get back in her car. She walked over to the fence. She put both hands flat on the top rail. Wade joined her. Slow. Why does the sheriff call you sir? Because his mother was my 3rd grade teacher. That's how it works out here. Adalyn did not answer. From the porch, Ivy waved at her a small hand, a small smile. Adalyn waved back before she thought about it. She drove back to the motel in Cedar Hollow in silence. In room 12, she opened her laptop, and for the first time typed the words herself into the county database. Hartley Cattle Company, Mesa Blanca County, acreage 14,237. Last appraisal $118,400,000. Sole owner Wade A. Holloway. She read the screen 3 times. The words from the first afternoon future parking lot repeated themselves in her own voice, in her own head, and she did not like the sound of them. Our phone rang. Garrett Pike. She let it go. She let it ring out. She turned the phone face down on the bedspread. That same evening, Marisol drove up the long gravel road to Hartley with the leather binder under her arm. She and Wade sat on the porch in the blue light. She set the binder on the table between them. Wade Pickey's already filed paperwork through a shell entity to claim adverse easement against the Eastern Flow Channel. He's not going to ask you nicely. He's going to try to take it through the courts and the legislature both. Wade poured 2 fingers of whiskey into each of 2 glasses. He did not say anything, and he's holding something over my son, Marisol said. Daniel just made associate at a firm in Dallas. Pike sits on their advisory board. I can't be your lawyer of record on this one. Wade, I'm sorry. Wade nodded once. You don't need to be. You just needed to come tell me. That's enough. 3 days later, Adeline came back to Hartley a 3rd time. She did not bring a bottle. She did not bring a trifolded contract or a tablet or an assistant. She carried instead a manila folder she had spent the previous evening reading line by line in her motel room her own company's draft of the Vista Lara purchase agreement, the version with her signature on page 41. She had read it twice in the airport before she signed it 3 months ago. Last night she had read it slowly, the way Eleanor used to read seed catalogs, and she had found on page 28 the clause that quietly granted Voss Meridian the right to redirect surface flow from Comanche Springs. After closing, she had signed it. She had not understood what she was signing. WDE was at the kitchen table when she came in. He poured a cup of coffee for her without asking. If I told you the deal is written would dry up your land within 5 years, she said. Would you believe me? WDE slid the cup toward her. I'd believe you were starting to see it. She sat down. She set her purse on the floor. She did not open the laptop she was not carrying. Ivy padded in barefoot from the front room with a sugar cookie wrapped in a napkin and held it out. Adeline took it in both hands like it was something that might break. Thank you, Ivy. You're welcome, Miss Adeline. After the coffee, we did something he had not done with another adult in 4 years. He stood up, took down a barn jacket from the peg by the door, and held the door for her. Come on, I want to show you something. They walked the long way around the south pasture, past the windmill that still pumped, though no one needed it to. Past the peon grove Eleanor had planted the year Ivy was born. At the top of the rise, behind the barn, beneath a single live oak, older than any deed, was a piece of granite the size of a saddle, low and gray, no inscription except a name and 2 dates. A clay pot of bluebonnet seedlings sat at its foot. My wife knew this land better than I do, Wade said. She used to say, land doesn't belong to anyone, Wade. People belong to land. Key doesn't understand that. I don't think you did either until this week. Adeline looked down at the grass. She did not try to answer for a long moment. I was raised in a high-rise, Mr. Holloway. My father sold leverage. He went broke twice. He taught me land was just a slow stock. And now I'm not sure what I was taught was right. They walked back together in silence. At the side of the barn, Ivy was brushing Biscuit's flank with both hands, talking to the mayor in a soft running stream of nonsense. Adeline stopped at the fence and watched. WDE stopped behind her and watched her watch his daughter. The distance between them measured in steps, in air, in years of being 2 different kinds of persons shortened by 1. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved away. The Voss Meridian boardroom in Dallas was on the 43rd floor, all glass and oiled walnut, with a view of downtown that had once made Adeline feel she had arrived. That morning, sitting in her usual seat at Garrett Pike's right hand, the view looked smaller than she remembered. Garrett opened the meeting by announcing a compressed timeline, 30 days to close Vista Lara instead of 90. He wanted the spring diversion application filed with the Texas Water Development Board before, and he smiled when he said it. Any noisy neighbors got litigious. Adeline kept her face still. Garrett, the easement isn't clean. The Hartley parcel controls upstream flow. We need their signature or the deal collapses in due diligence. Garrett's smile did not waver. Adeline Hartley is a sentimental man with a child and a dead wife. He'll sign for the right number. And if he doesn't, we have other ways. He stood. He walked around the table. As he passed her chair, he laid a hand briefly on her shoulder. The grown-ups are handling it now. Adeline did not move. She knew that sentence. She had used it. She had used it in this very boardroom on a junior analyst 8 months ago. She had used it to a contractor in Cedar Hollow only 3 days prior. She had used it because Garrett had used it on her 4 years ago in her first week on the job, and she had absorbed it the way a child absorbs the cadence of a parent's contempt. She sat very still until the rest of the meeting was over. Then she walked to the women's room on the 43rd floor, and stood in front of the mirror for a long time without turning the water on. She took her phone out. She dialed Miss Ray's. Off the record. What kind of man is Wade Holloway? There was a pause of exactly 3 seconds. The kind you don't try to fool twice. Adeline put the phone back in her bag. That night, she drove south. She did not call her assistant. She did not pack a bag. She drove 3 hours in the dark, the Dallas Tower lights falling away behind her, and she pulled up at the gate of Hartley Cattle Company at 1 o'clock in the morning. Wade was still awake. He had been in the tack room repairing the cinch on Ivy's saddle for the morning ride. He saw the headlights through the kitchen window. He walked out, opened the gate, and waited. She got out of the car. She left her keys in the ignition. "I'm not here as a buyer, Mr. Holloway." He looked at her for a long second. Then he opened the gate wider. "Then come in, Miss Voss." As she stepped onto the gravel of the drive, her phone vibrated in her hand. Unknown number. She glanced down. It was a photograph. A young man in a graduation cap and gown. The Texas A&M Law School logo behind him. Beneath the image, 6 words. "Ask your friend Reyes to stay out of this. GP." She read it. Her hand closed around the phone. She did not show Wade. She did not need to. He saw the change in her face, and he did not ask. He only tipped his head toward the porch. They sat there until the sky went gray. In the morning they drove together to Cedar Hollow Feed and Tack, the long low building on the south edge of town with a wooden bin of bulk oats by the door and a handletarred sign that read, "No credit, no exceptions. Sorry, Grandma." Hollis Vance had owned the store for 46 years. He was 78, lean as a fence post, and had not missed a workday since his wife's funeral in 2004. He looked up when the bell jangled. He grinned at Wade. He looked past Wade at Adeline, slow and assessing. The way a horse trader looks at an unfamiliar mare. "This the Dallas lady I've been hearing about." "That's her," Wade said. Hollis wiped his hands on the apron at his waist. He spoke directly to Adeline now. No edge in it, but no soft cushion either. "Miss, your chairman came through here in 19. Same shoes, different face. Tried to buy out your boy Wade." Wade said no. Pike said he'd find another way. Adeline did not flinch. She held his eyes. "Mr. Vance, do you know what kind of way he meant?" Hollis smiled very slightly and gestured for them to follow him into the back room. The back room of Cedar Hollow Feed and Tack smelled of leather oil and old paper. Hollis crossed to a tall green safe that had been bought used from a defunct bank in San Saba in 1961. He spun the dial. He opened the door. He reached past a stack of sale records and pulled out a brown envelope, soft at the corners. Inside was a photocopy of a meeting transcript dated June 11, 2019. The parties were Garrett Pike, then a senior partner at a Dallas land acquisition firm, and the deputy commissioner of the Texas General Land Office. The subject was a contingency plan to be activated only if the Hartley parcel could not be acquired through private negotiation to pursue an eminent domain taking on behalf of a public-private water infrastructure consortium. The transcript carried both signatures, the date stamp, and the small embossed seal of the Deputy Commissioner's office. The original had vanished from the State Archive in 2020. This was the only copy. "My nephew worked in that office," Hollis said. "Made a copy of the file before they cleaned the cabinet. He passed away the year after, but he left it to me. I've been waiting 7 years to give this to somebody who'd use it. Right?" He handed the envelope to Wade. Wade handed it to Adeline. Her fingers closed around it. They trembled faintly before she steadied them. This was enough. With Adeline's testimony as corroboration, this was enough to void the Vista Lara purchase, dissolve Garrett Pike from the board, and open a federal conspiracy investigation that would last years. On the drive back to Hartley, Adeline did not speak. Wade drove the 1998 Ford F-250, with one wrist on the wheel. At the second cattle guard, he eased the truck to a stop. He let the engine idle. "Miss Voss, you can give that paper back to Hollis right now and pretend you never saw it. Drive back to Dallas. Sign the deal. Nobody would blame you." She looked down at the envelope on her lap. She did not look up. "I'd blame me." Wade nodded one time. He put the truck back in gear. "Then we go to Austin Monday." It was the first time in 3 weeks of conversations that he had used the word we. Adeline registered it. She did not remark on it. She turned, her face to the side window, where the live oaks ran past in long, uneven rows, and she watched them without seeing them when they pulled into the Hartley Drive. Ivy came running from the barn in her small boots, braids swinging. She did not slow down. She wrapped her arms around Adeline's waist in a single short, complete hug and let go before Adeline had time to react. "You're back! I'm back," Adeline said, and her voice was not the voice she used on the 43rd floor. Wade watched from the porch. He slid his hands into the pockets of his flannel and stayed there a long moment before he stepped down to meet them. Monday morning was cold and clear. Wade drove the Ford F-250 south on Highway 281 with Adeline in the passenger seat, the brown envelope and a thicker manila folder of her own materials in a leather briefcase wedged between them. Ivy was at the Ryaz house in Cedar Hollow, where Marisol had promised pancakes, fairy tales, and a slow morning brushing the neighbor's pony. Somehow, south of Marble Falls, they began to talk. They had spent 20 days within a few miles of each other, and they had not yet really spoken. "My father went broke twice," Adeline said, looking at the river running parallel to the road. "Once when I was 9, and once when I was 15. He raised me on a phrase, 'Never love anything that can't appreciate and value.' He meant it as kindness." WDE did not look away from the road. "My wife wrote her senior thesis on Comanche Springs, range ecology, fall semester 92. That was how we met. I was a junior, she was a senior. She asked me if I knew anything about my own water, and I said no. And she said, 'Well, that's a shame.' And I said, 'Maybe you could teach me.'" Adeline smiled at the windshield. "She'd have liked you," Wade said. "Not at first, but eventually it was the first smile of the trip that did not have anything to sell." They reached Austin a little past noon. Theo Marchetti was waiting in his corner office on the 18th floor of a stone-faced building, Elding 2 blocks off Congress Avenue, his sleeves already rolled. He read the Holly's envelope without speaking. 90 seconds passed. He set it down on the blotter. "Wade, this is enough. This is more than enough. We file Wednesday." Adeline cleared her throat. "Mr. Marchetti, if I voluntarily resign from Voss Meridian and turn over internal documents as a cooperating witness, can we file Tuesday morning?" Theo looked at Wade. Wade looked at Adeline. Adeline looked at the bookshelf behind Theo's head and did not turn away. "Tuesday morning," Theo said. That night, they took separate rooms on the 8th floor of a hotel on West 6th Street. At 10 o'clock, Wade knocked on the door of room 812. When Adeline opened it, he held out a glass bottle of water, a green glass quart, hand-corked. "Condensation already on the outside. Helps you sleep. Eleanor used to swear by it." She took it. She held it in both hands. "Why are you doing this with me, Wade? You could have done it without me." Wade thought about it. "Beck. AUSE, you turned around. Most people don't." He closed the door. She stood in the middle of the room with the bottle in her hands for nearly a minute. Then she poured a glass. She drank it slowly, sitting on the edge of the bed, and she did not check her phone, and she did not open her laptop when the glass was empty. She lay down on top of the comforter, fully dressed, and slept for the first time in 3 nights. In Dallas, Garrett Pike was on his 4th call to her phone. None of them was answered. He turned to the security director on the other end of the line. "Finha," at 7 a.m. Tuesday, Adeline knocked on the door of room 8.10. She was wearing the same blazer as the day before. She held the empty water bottle by the neck. "I'm ready." The clerk's office of the Travis County Civil District Court opened at 9 o'clock. Theo Marchetti was the first attorney through the door. He filed 3 documents simultaneously. The first was a civil complaint on behalf of Wade Holloway and Hartley Cat, the company against Voss Meridian Land Holdings, the chairman of its board, Garrett Pike, individually, and a list of 17 co-defendants alleging conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted abuse of eminent domain proceedings, and willful violation of Texas surface and groundwater law. The second was Adeline Voss's sworn affidavit as a cooperating witness. The third was a sealed packet of internal Voss Meridian emails proving Garrett Pike had personally drafted the buried diversion clause knowing what it would do. The filings were public by 10. By noon, the Dallas business press had it. By 1, Voss Meridian had lost 41% of its market capitalization. The board convened an emergency session at 2 o'clock. They voted 7-1 to remove Garrett Pike, effective immediately. Garrett cast the one dissenting vote against himself. At 4 o'clock, the Dallas field office of the FBI opened a formal fraud and conspiracy file. Wade and Adeline walked out of the courthouse together. They did not hold hands. They crossed Congress. Ress Avenue in the slanted afternoon light and walked 4 blocks to a small coffee shop with a tin ceiling. They sat at a table by the window. Adeline placed her hand flat on the wood. Wade placed his hand 5 centimeters away from hers. Neither hand moved. "What happens to you now?" Wade asked. "I don't know. The board may keep me. They may not. Either way, I'm not going back to that office." The same person. Wade looked at the street. "There's room at Hartley if you need to think for a while. Spare cabin's been empty since Eleanor's sister moved out." She turned her face toward him. "Wade, that's not nothing. What you just said, I know." On the long drive back to Cedar Hollow, her phone rang. It was a number. She recognized the board's outside counsel. She put it on speaker low and listened. They were offering her the interim chairman's seat. They were doubling her base. They were asking her to take Voss Meridian through the cleanup and out the other side. "I'll think about it," she said. She ended the circa. LL. Wade glanced sideways at her. "You're considering it?" She looked out at the dark line of the hill country to the west. "I'm considering whether I want to spend the next 10 years undoing what Garrett built, or whether I want to do something I haven't done yet." WDE did not ask her what that something was. He did not need to. He kept driving. For 2 weeks, Adeline stayed in the cabin behind the main house at Hartley. The cabin was small, 1 room, and a stove, a tin roof Eleanor's sister had repainted green in 2020. A porch with 2 cane-bottom chairs. Adeline wore jeans she had bought at the feed store. The cowboy boots Wade had quietly placed by the door her second morning. There had real mud on them by the end of the first week. She drank coffee on the main house porch every morning with Wade and Ivy. On a Thursday, Ivy decided to teach her how to tie a real cowboy knot, the kind that holds a halter rope to a fence post and pulls free with 1 tug, 2 loops. Miss Adeline through the back like a real knot, not a city knot. Adeline laughed a clear open laugh she did not remember making before. Her head tipped back against the porch post. Wade watched from the kitchen window with his coffee, and he did not look away. She formally declined the chairman's seat the second Monday. In its place, she announced the founding of the Voss Meridian Land Trust, a nonprofit conservation foundation chartered under Texas law, for the purpose of protecting family ranches from corporate acquisition and aquifer draining development. Initial capital, $40 million drawn from her whistleblower award, her personal savings, and the liquidation of her Dallas penthouse. The grand jury indicted Garrett Pike on the 23rd of October for federal counts. He was remanded to home confinement pending trial. His Vista Larga shell entity collapsed inside a week. Hollis Vance was called as a witness. He wore his old Estesan and a tie his late wife had picked out for him 40 years before. He answered questio, NS in short, plain sentences. When he stepped down from the stand, Wade was waiting for him in the hallway. Hollis put a hand on Wade's shoulder. Eleanor would have been proud. Son Wade nodded. He could not get any words out. Marisol Reyes, her son Daniel, now safely employed as an associate at Marchetti and Boyd in Austin, out of Pike's reach forever, finally opened the leather binder she had kept in the bottom drawer of her file cabinet for 7 years. Inside, behind the deed history, was a single folded sheet of cream stationery. Eleanor's handwriting, a cautil written 6 months before the accident. Marisol drove out to Hartley on a Friday evening and put it in WDE's hands. He sat down at the kitchen table to read it. There was a line in it he had never seen. "If I'm not there, Wade, find someone who can stand on this land without trying to own it." Wade read it twice. He folded it. He put it in the pocket of his flannel shirt. He walked out onto the porch. Adeline was sitting on the 2-piece step with Ivy beside her, teaching her how to find the first stars of December. By the first week of December, Vista Larara had been acquired by the Voss Meridian Land Trust for $89 million, well below the sale price Garrett had once chased, but enough to satisfy the seller's note and the lender. The land was placed under a perpetual conservation easement. Comanche Springs received state-level protective designation. No diversion would ever be drilled. The Austin Metropolitan Water contract was reassigned to a desalination project on the coast, where it should have been from the beginning. Adeline moved out of the cedar cabin the second week of December, and into a small rented house on the south end of Cedar Hollow, close to Hartley, but not on it. The house had a yellow door and a porch that faced east, and she liked it. She was not ready yet for what lay between the cabin and the main house. Wade understood. He did not ask. When she came over for supper on Wednesdays, he simply said, "Tea a third plate." On a clear afternoon a few days before Christmas, Wade walked the fence line between Hartley and Vista Lara, with a coil of new wire over one shoulder and a fence post driver in his hand. The sky was the high cold blue that only comes in Texas in December. It was the same stretch of fence where Adeline had stood 3 months earlier in her city heels and her tailored blazer, and called his pasture her future parking lot. She came down the dirt road on foot in her boots, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the Dusty Bell. She handed him one. They worked without speaking for almost an hour. She held the wire taut against the cedar posts while he drove them deeper into the calish. Her hands had calyces, now small ones, on the fleshy part of her thumbs, from the work of the last 2 weeks. When the last post was set, they straightened up together and looked west across the pasture toward the rise where Comanche Springs ran cold and clear and older than the state of Texas. "Wade," she said. "I don't know what this is yet." He set the driver down. He looked at her for a long moment. The way a man looks at whether he is trying to read doesn't have to be anything yet. Adeline Land doesn't rush. She nodded once. She did not look away. A small thudding of boots came up behind them. Ivy was leading Biscuit by the halter, her braids swinging, her cheeks pink from the cold. She walked straight between them, slipped her right hand into Adeline's left, slipped her left hand into WDE's right, and turned the 3 of them gently to face the spring. The water was still moving. It had always been moving. It would keep moving long after all 3 of them, and after the fence, and after the wire, and after whatever names anyone wrote on any deed. Wade felt his daughter's small fingers tight around his own. He felt on Ivy's other side the woman who had stood on this same line in September, and tried to take it from him, now standing on it with him, in the same boots, in the same cold, looking at the same water. He did not let go. Neither did Adeline. Some fences mark where land ends, others mark where it begins.